All right, y'all. Let's do it. Let's do it on this Football Friday. Ty Butler in the house. We are talking about the New York Giants. The New York Football Giants. Here's what I will say to start off the show. And by the way, hit me up in the comments. Let's talk about it. Shout out Harvey, my guy Harvey. I'll be working with you next weekend, my G, New York game day. Big up to Harvey and soccer fan, not having a good season with your team, the Red Bulls, but it's okay, man. Devil started up. Big up Don LaGreco's making his TV debut tomorrow. So Harvey, I know you'll be watching that. Shout out to my man Don. Excited for that. But football, the New York Giants. Here's what last night clinched for me. And today, the question I pose to y'all is, are Giants fans overreacting to what they saw last night? Here's what last night did clinch for me off the top. There will not be a single game the rest of the way for the Giants to where in analyzing the game beforehand, I say they've got no shot. Because I'm 0 for 2 in that regard. I said they had no shot of beating the Chargers. Beat the Chargers pretty easily. I said they got no shot of beating Philadelphia because it was just an awful spot to be in. The Eagles coming off of a loss where Saquon barely got the ball. They blew a 14-point lead against the Broncos. And I know the Broncos are good, but a 14-point blown lead in the fourth quarter is not something we should be seeing from the defending champions. And, apparently there was a team meeting for 2 hours because we got some issues between the quarterback and his two wide receivers. So I thought this is all setting up for the Giants, who we've grown accustomed to seeing this happen. This is all setting up for the Giants to just get dog walked on national television. And that did not happen. So today, fans are excited. They are pumping their chest out. I was outside, dropping my kids off. I see a bunch of Giant sweatshirts. And I'm like, I haven't seen these sweatshirts in 2 years. So they're excited. But I'll tell you what, to answer the question, are they overreacting? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is a fan base that has been starving for competent quarterback play for going back a decade. The last time the Giants had a quarterback throw for 30 and that in this day and age isn't even a lot. The last time the Giants had a quarterback throw for 30 or more touchdowns was 2015, so 10 years ago. And then since then, we've seen, we saw the decomposition of Eli Manning, Daniel Jones flash in the pan, but it wasn't like in that 2022 season, he lit it up. So to finally have a guy who you watch throughout the preseason, and now in 2 of his first 3 games, not only has shown, flashes, but in large spurts has given you hope that you have your quarterback. Now, still to be determined what his ceiling is. But this is what I always give you guys honesty. I am someone, and if people listen to me and consume my content, know this. I'm very opinionated. I've got takes on everything. It's funny when my wife's like, "Oh, you swear you're right about everything," and I'm like, "Well, duh, I'm always right." Nah, I'm like, oh, when you're giving a take, like, shouldn't you be confident in that take? But anyway, I want to walk something back because I'm learning that I was wrong about something that I said before the season. And that is, and I give Mike Tannenbaum credit. I said before the season, it would almost be a dereliction of duty, organizational malpractice, and just flat out selfishness if Brian Dable prematurely brought Jackson Dart into this year trying to save his job. which he ended up doing, because you run the risk of maybe this guy being set up to be fantastic, but because you aren't necessarily arming him with not just the weapons and the coaching, but arming him with like the most ideal of conditions to be in to become that franchise quarterback, it just sets you back years and years. And last night I'm watching, and honestly, one of my first thoughts was, should they have started him week one? Excuse me. See, I get allergies once I gotta, walk takes back. I'm not used to having to do that. Should the Giants have actually started Jackson Dart week one? Because if he's good enough to start in week four, excuse me, he's good enough to start in week one. Not, I get the counter to that is having 3 weeks to sit, veteran leadership, learning behind guys who've done it before does provide some value. But coming off of what he did this past preseason, which again, you kind of graded on a curve because he's not exactly going up against, starters. But coming off of what he did this past preseason, now having seen him in 3 weeks, and he was not good against the Saints, but to beat the Chargers and to handily beat the Eagles, and for large chunks of that game, have the Eagles defense looking silly. Now, I understand Philadelphia is without some of its top end starters. Quinyon Mitchell goes out of the game yesterday. Jalen Carter, who just randomly pops up on the injury report a couple of days ago, is dealing with a heel injury. He didn't play. So I understand that they were down some players. You even saw, who was it? Cooper DeJean limping in the third quarter of the game. So I get it's not the Philly defense from last year. They lost some players and some of their key guys that they retained were out. But that's an impressive victory in also making some of their defensive players, Zach Bond on a play, he just kind of mixed them up AI style, and not AI, artificial intelligence. Allen Iverson just crossed them up. So there are many reasons to be encouraged, which is why I come on here and say, no, our Giant fans are not overreacting to what they've seen. This kid has the tools to be good. And what you love about it, if you're watching this, one of the things that you absolutely love, and it's a little bit of disrespect to Russell Wilson, but who cares? Jackson Dart brings that type of like infectious energy that just inspires the entire team. Because aside from week 2 against the Cowboys, where the Giants put up 37 points, there wasn't a lot of hope in that offense to be able to do too much of anything. So if you're the defense, you now feel that enhanced level of pressure. Like, yo, we can't allow these guys to score because we just don't know if our offense is going to get any points. So there's that, that battle, and frustration starts to boil over. You've got a head coach who's on the hot seat. He's growing impatient. So friction, tensions are high. There's a lot that there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of chaos and toxicity that Jackson Dart was coming into. And boy, has he handled it with ease. And because of how good he's performed, has inspired both sides of the ball. To where, Brian Burns, he's having a hell of a season so far. 8 sacks already. Like, guy, when you know you're off, when you know you have a really good offense, there's no measurement for this. There's no metric for this. But that defense gets a tick up in motivation, if you will, because it's like, we got to get these guys back on the field. Our offense is balling. They can't stop them. So let's do everything in our power. Let's dot every I, cross every T, but also let's play with a passion and an intensity that shows us and shows the opposing team, yeah, we're about that action because we want desperately to get that offense back on the field. And I think it has created such a like hype machine on that sideline that you just could not have otherwise gotten with a guy like Russell Wilson. And it shows up when Jackson Dart is forced to go into the tent. And I don't think I've ever seen this before. I've been watching football my entire life, man. The head coach immediately goes into the tent. Now, sometimes he will when there's a fear of like some significant injury and you're just like checking in. But to have this did not look like some significant injury. Brian Dable went into that tent because he knew that's the only chance I have of saving my job. If that kid is on the field and he continues to look as good as he does, that's my only shot. So there was a little bit of thirstiness. If I'm being honest, it does come across as weird, like just the way that it's shown, the way that he looks in his eyes, all the hugging. I mean, some of it is just weird. It's just odd. I get it. He's clinging on to Dart for dear life. I mean, trying to save his job, which some would argue last night clinched that for Dable. Like he saved his job with that win. But there's some weird energy, man. Like you're a grown ass man, dog. The way you looking into his eyes, it's just like, please save me, please save me. So it reeks of desperation. It's just odd to see it. It's odd to see how it's playing out. You understand the sentiment and the emotion from Dable. You just come away from how he's expressing said sentiment and emotion, feeling like, oh boy, it's a little weird, man. But anyway, shout out to the Giant fans up in here. I want to hear from y'all, man. I would love for this to be a two-way conversation. The Giant fans just ecstatic today, and rightfully so. I came across this tweet from a producer I used to work with at SiriusXM Mad Dog Radio, and I'm gonna pull it up for you guys because it caught my attention immediately last night. Caught my attention immediately. So let's pull it up, put it on the screen so you guys can see it. We have now added it, and I'm gonna blow it up just so it's bigger on the screen. Here's my man Bob Stew. He's actually working right now. He does the 9 to noon show on Mad Dog Radio. He's like, this is about to be the biggest win of Brian Dable's Giants career. A job saver. And as you can see underneath the tweet, I responded to this and I said, bigger than a playoff win? Because that struck me. Like, is a win in week, 6 of the season bigger than a win in week 18 of the season or week 19, I guess? I was like, nah, man, pump the brakes on that. Pump the brakes. I cannot go that far. It's week 6. It's against the Eagles, short week. So are we able to go that far and say it's bigger than a playoff win? But then I slept a couple of hours on it, and I'm contemplating, and this is why you love social media sometimes, because it can be thought-provoking. Maybe it's not so crazy that this is the biggest win of his coaching career. Because you go back to 2022, it was smoke and mirrors. No one actually believed in the Giants. And though they beat Minnesota, hell of a win, that did not lead us to think that they were going to win the Super Bowl. And hell, none of us really bought into Daniel Jones being the franchise quarterback. So in real time, as it's happening, yes, the Giant fans were excited. It was short-lived because, ironically enough, it was the Eagles they played the week after, and they just got annihilated. But maybe there's a conversation to be had about this win. If it ends up being a career saver for Brian Dable, then you can say, yeah, maybe it is a bigger win. If he ends up getting fired, like if the Giants, bottom out and he still gets canned, then we go back and say, nah, man, the biggest win of his life was him beating the Minnesota Vikings. But I thought it was an interesting question, or not question. I thought it was an interesting statement that Bob posed. And, in reevaluating that, maybe it is the biggest win of Brian Dable's career, especially if it saves him and it solidifies that this is his franchise quarterback. He's got a guy who, for the next decade under center, is going to help him win football games, which at no point so far with the Giants has he had. It was a great win for them. This comes from Pops, my pastor. Shout out the place of exchange, TPOE. Make sure y'all are in service Sunday morning, beginning at 10 a.m. Can't be there in person. Streaming live on YouTube. It's a great win for them. Funniest part was when Wilson came in for one snap. Crowd was brutal. Love it. Yo, so I felt this as a viewer watching the camera pan to Russell Wilson on the sideline taking warm-up throws. And I'm not even a Giants fan, but I just had the face like, oh, Lord, here we go. You saw at MetLife Stadium, Giant fans are just like, nah, we are over that experience. It was visible. It was audible. The last person they wanted to see come into that game was Russell Wilson, because we saw it. What was it, 2 weeks ago, right? Against the Chargers. He comes in and takes a bad sack. So it's just like, nah, man, like polar opposites. One dude is mobile, young, and our franchise quarterback. The other dude is old, slow, and almost out of here. That was hilarious. Russ comes in for one snap. He's getting booed. Brian Dable is like cursing out the medical dude on the side. Like, yo, what's going on? Get Jackson Dart back in the game. And the medical guy's like, yo, he's going through concussion protocol. What do you want me to do? It's not like we can circumvent that. Can't have that happen. Brian Dable's cursing this man out. But it's because of a disdain, and this is what I find so interesting. Russell Wilson did not put a gun to the Giants' head and say, y'all better sign me. They thought it was a good idea to sign that man to a $10.5 million contract and immediately name him the starter. So to come all the way to where it's week 6 and the guy you replaced him with is in the medical tent. You're the head coach who was, part of the decision making when it came to signing Russ. You're now seeing him come into the game, and you are taking on the same energy as the fans are in the stadium and watching the game like, oh, no, hold up. Hold up. This is not happening. You're in the tent. If we could have like a close-up in the tent, I would imagine Brian Dable is trying to drag that man out of there, Jackson Dart. He's going through concussion protocol. He's like, yo, can we skip a couple of steps? I need him back in the game. Serious question. If Brian Dable would have been allowed to, they say, we can hold off concussion protocol examination until after the game, would Brian Dable have signed up for that? Absolutely, 100%. Absolutely. No questions asked. So it makes Russ look bad. It also makes Dable and Shane look bad because they signed this dude. You guys signed him. So I thought that was hilarious. That was very funny. And then, to bookend it all, Dart comes back into the game, crowd erupts, and he's out there doing what he does. If I'm Russell, I listen, I don't care how much confidence you have in yourself, how, how much self-esteem you have that's like unwavering. When that when your head coach does that and the fans are doing that, it obviously is going to affect you. You're a veteran. You are a Super Bowl champion. You are someone who was at one point considered one of the best quarterbacks in football. And this is how your career is ending. It's crazy, man. It's absolutely crazy. I don't think that this win springboards the Giants into like playoff conversations. That's not what's going to happen here because the schedule is tough. I'm very interested to see how Philly responds to this game because they get the Giants at home two Sundays from now, and I'll pull up the schedule here for y'all just so we can check it out together. I don't think that at 2-4 you should start thinking, man, could we make the playoffs? Like that to me is silly. But if we look at the schedule, and I'll blow it up for y'all a little bit here. You've got Denver, who my New York Jets are going to get blasted by in London this week. I love Aaron Glenn, by the way, saying we had a great week of practice. Well, you had a great week of practice last week, and then you got just your rear end kicked in by the Cowboys. You were down 30-3. So Glenn once again reiterating that the Jets had a great week of practice. Love that. Anyway, so the Giants get a little bit of a mini bye here. They're in Denver next Sunday. They're going to lose that game. And then they're in Philadelphia. It's hard to imagine, y'all. Like, as good as they looked last night, it's hard for me to imagine they're going to sweep the Eagles. That is not going to happen. And then you're home for San Francisco, at Chicago, home for Green Bay, at Detroit, at New England. Like, none of those are gimme wins. As great as the Giants looked last night, none of those are gimme wins. You got Vegas at this point looks like a gimme. But, you just lost to the Saints. So the next 7 games before the bye are still tough. This is an unforgiving schedule for the New York Giants. But you do have every bit of reason to be optimistic today. I don't think that there should be a raining on their parade. And actually, coming from a Jet fan, if I'm being candid, I'm a little bit envious. I'm a little bit envious because I saw this happening. Not Jackson Dart being great, but I remember before the season when I was on the radio, I talked about how the difference between the Giant fan and the Jet fan coming into the year is that the Jet fan has to put all of their eggs in the basket of Justin Fields. You're living and dying with him. That's your starting quarterback. It's not like, all right, you pull him, you go to Tyrod Taylor, and all of a sudden there's this like uptick in trajectory, right? Whereas the Giants, if things go south, at the very least, you have a quarterback who you're going to turn to, that you're going to audition to be your starter for the next decade. And that just springs forth hope, right? Like Jackson Dart was a symbol of hope, of optimism, and a reason to be engaged the entirety of the season. Even if the Giants stunk and you're out on Shane, you're out on Dable, you want to see this kid play. So that was always kind of like, dangling there in the background, which is something the Jets did not have, a young quarterback they could go to and, bring in and excite you as a fan. Which I said this earlier too on X, at Ty D Butler, hit me up. How soon do we get to the Jets could have drafted Jackson Dart. Like, is that a conversation that's kind of just lingering there that at some point will have to be discussed? Because the Jets did have a chance to draft Jackson Dart. Now they went with Memble, who's so far been really good at right tackle, but would you rather have your franchise quarterback or your franchise right tackle? That's that is definitely going to be something we're talking about going forward. Did the Jets miss on yet another opportunity to get a quarterback? And the fact that this is happening right in your backyard is just like brutal, man. It is absolutely brutal. Absolutely brutal. Scatterboo, he's another one that he's just an electrifier. he run he remind and it's a different play style. It's a different play style because they have different prototypes, but in an odd way, he reminds me a little bit of Pacheco, where it's like he runs like his hair's on fire. Like that dude is just running to wall. He's doing black backflips into the end zone, Hulk Hogan style. He's ripping his shirt on the Thursday night football post game show last night. He's just incredible, man. Like that duo is fun. If you're a Giants fan, you are having fun watching these two guys. Wasn't fun to see them lose a 14-3 lead against the Saints last week and have 5 turnovers. What was it? 5 straight possessions of turnovers. But just the energy, like the enthusiasm and the joy that they bring to you, they also bring to the team, which is important. Like they all look like they're having fun. It doesn't feel like they're miserable because you're 2-4. You have a right to be miserable when you're coming into a game 5 weeks into the season and you have 1 win. You have every right to be miserable. That's just natural. The Giants on the sidelines yesterday did not look like that. They were having fun. There was a certain joy and energy to them, and it's because they've been inspired and galvanized by Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo. And you have to love that. So again, the question, if you can see it on YouTube or on X where we're streaming today, Ty D Butler hit me up. Are the Giant fans overreacting? Absolutely not. This is what sports is all about, man. There's an ebb and flow. There's like a roller coaster of emotions when it comes to fandom. So look, if I'm an Eagles fan and Giant fans are chirping at me, I'm like, hold up. Hold up. What I would say to that is, since you last won multiple playoff games, we've won 2 Super Bowls. So if I'm an Eagles fan, I'm just like, nah, have fun. It's a pathetic loss, but I'm not allowing a Giant fan today to talk trash to me. Since you last won multiple playoff rounds, we've won 2 Super Bowls. Check that out. We have 2 Super Bowls to your 1 lone playoff win in 2022. So celebrate, have fun. But if I'm a Philly fan, I ain't trying to hear that. But for the Giant fans themselves, I don't think there is. I was gonna say there's no such thing as overreacting because if you're trying to put Jackson Dart into the Hall of Fame, that's a bit of a stretch. But I don't think any rational Giant fan is talking like that today. I think the rational Giant fan just feels energized, just feels reinvigorated because in what can be considered the most important position in sports, you have now found life and found life more abundantly. So it's a great day to be a Giant fan. Now you get a little mini bye to get you ready for the Denver Broncos. I think the one thing that just stinks, you watched that game last night and you come away from it thinking, bro, we were up 14-3 on what might be the worst team in the NFL and we lost. Could you imagine we had won that game? And instead of being 2-4, we're 3-3. Like the type of life we would have for this season. Again, I don't think you should be thinking about the playoffs, but I do think that wins that have been hard to come by the last couple of years, those excite you. Those excite you. So shout out to the Giants, man. That is a tremendous performance. On the flip side, Eagles. I've seen this movie before. In fact, it wasn't that long ago. It was 2 years ago when you started the season 10-1 and then ended the year losing 5 of 6 games, getting blasted in the playoffs by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This feels like a team that is on the brink of imploding. The Eagles are very talented. The Eagles are well coached. The problem with the Eagles is sometimes personalities, as we've seen for our entire lives watching football, can get in the way, can clash. And once those personalities feel vindicated by whatever it is that they're expressing being put on full display on national television, it creates a lot of tension. Here's what I mean by that. So A.J. Brown has been throwing a lot of subs, and he's clearly not happy with his role in the offense. And last week, if you weren't watching that game against the Broncos, at first look, it appeared Jalen had overthrown him on a touchdown pass. Then you watch the replay, and it's like A.J. Brown just stopped running a route, didn't look good. But what A.J. Brown is saying in that situation is, this dude just isn't good enough. That's what he's telling us. He ain't good enough. Because what wide receiver is going to do that and then consistently complain about a quarterback they're high on? A.J. Brown clearly is not high on his quarterback. So then we go last night and we see Devontae Smith, who was kind of having a good game. And this ends up being the biggest play of the game, in my opinion. The Giants are up 3 going into halftime. They get the ball back and they go 3 and out. Devontae Smith is wide open down the line. Wide open. And Jalen just overthrows him. If he connects with Devontae Smith, Eagles score a touchdown. They then go up 4. All the momentum is swung. Because you go from being, what were the Giants up, 13-3? To now you're trailing. It's the second half. It's the defending champions who are oozing with confidence. And you've come out of halftime putting no points on the board. So the momentum could have quickly flipped in that game. Instead, what happened is we saw Jalen Hurts overthrow another receiver on this team that is unhappy with his role in the offense. So last week it was A.J. Brown, and we can blame him. He stopped running his route. But this week it's on Jalen Hurts, who overthrows a wide open receiver. And Jalen's actually pretty good on those throws, man. Like in the Super Bowl, he hit, I think it was Devontae Smith, on a deep ball like that. That was even more contested. He wasn't even wide open. So once you give ammunition and there's some vindication felt by the unhappy personalities we talked about, that creates a chaotic, tense, toxic environment, even in a locker room that is filled with champions because they all won it together last year. So I think that their biggest problem is themselves. They're good enough to win, but they also have a quarterback that I don't think through the first 6 weeks has played very well. He's done so in spurts, but has not played very well. And we can't forget about Saquon Barkley. Saquon having a down year off of an historic season. What did Saquon have last night? And you know this game meant a lot to him. Saquon goes out there and he's got 58 rushing yards against one of the worst rushing defenses in all of football. He had 58 rushing yards, and by the way, this started the game with 2 big runs. So you thought, okay, he's gonna cook, but just didn't materialize. So it is a horrendous loss for the Eagles, a horrendous loss, and it's one that you could actually stomach if they beat the Broncos, because then it just becomes, they look past the Giants. It happens sometimes. You saw Buffalo slip up. Like, these things tend to happen. Even the best teams sometimes can lose to inferior opponents, you know, based on circumstances. But we've now seen 5 straight ugly quarters from the Eagles. That fourth quarter against Denver, and then the entire game last night where they were scoreless in the second half. The Eagles, with Hurts, with AJ, Devontae, Saquon, Goddard. I get the offensive line is banged up. With those guys and those weapons, you put up a donut against this giant defense in the second half? That's pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. So there's some trouble in Philadelphia. Absolutely a panic time, because the expectations are high. The vibes are very low. The losses are just ugly. And you just now can go back and say, good chance they could have lost that Cowboys game if not for the CD drop. Could have lost the Kansas City game if not for the Kelsey drop that turned into an interception. It took a ferocious comeback in the second half to beat the Rams. Remember, the Rams were just blowing the doors off the Eagles. Rams were up 19-7. They were up big in this game. They were up 26-7. Then the Eagles, and Hurts to his credit, put them on their back, and one could have lost to Tampa Bay because you allowed the Bucs to get hot in that second half. So there's not a single win on the schedule for the Eagles, who are 4-2, where you feel like they played an impressive fourth quarter game, where the entire performance for 4 quarters was impressive. Everyone is like, there were some moments there where it didn't look very good, which reminds you of 2 years ago. I remember it, not just because I was watching it, because 10-1, it was the only one loss come true in the first 11 weeks of the season, and that was my football team. Tony Adams won the interception that sealed it for the Jets, beating this Eagles team. So you're starting to feel like this looks too familiar. And now they've got Minnesota next week, the Giants again, then a bye week. Here's after the bye. At Green Bay, home for Detroit, at Dallas, home for Chicago, at Los Angeles. The Eagles team, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but if that Eagles team that we saw last night shows up after the bye, they could go 0-5. I'm not predicting that's going to happen, but if the Eagles team we saw last night, they show up in that capacity, at Green Bay, home for Detroit, at Dallas, home for Chicago, at Los Angeles, it's on the table. They go 0-5. So there's still time to right the ship if you're Philadelphia. But this looks all too familiar. And the benefit of the doubt that you get coming off of a Super Bowl win, to some degree, gets muted when there's friction in the locker room. And there are certain behaviors that we've seen before, and that before is not that long ago. It's just 2 seasons ago. Last year, the vibes were high, man. Last year, the vibes were high. That defense was just you unbreakable. The offense was clicking because Saquon, was en route to an historic season. Just doesn't feel like that for Philadelphia right now at all. Giants, as we close out here today, their fans deserve to celebrate. Their fans deserve to celebrate, because that's a hell of a win. probably their best win since 2022. Not probably, it is their best win since 2022. The degree of importance, the quarterback, what it means for the head coach, the opponent, national television, all that baked in together, it is without question their best win since the 2022 playoffs. And that includes beating the Chargers a couple weeks ago because the Chargers is like, yeah, they're 3-0, West Coast to East Coast. Chargers kind of, just didn't take them seriously. They were due for that type of a performance. Last night, they took it to the Eagles. They took it to the Eagles. If you were watching this game with someone who did not know anything about football, this is the first football game you're watching. They'd be like, man, the Eagles stink. The Giants, is that one of the best teams in the NFL? Because that's what it looked like. Ty D. Butler, that's how you find me on YouTube. And of course, on X, hit me up on Instagram as well, Ty D. Butler. I appreciate you guys for tuning into the stream. We'll be back later on, get into the Giants. And then, of course, I'll be on Sunday morning before the Jets play at 9:30. So a whole lot to get into with week 6 of the NFL season. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Holla at your boy. Enjoy the rest of your morning and afternoon.